This is a day I thought would never come. For the first time on YouTube, the Radeon 9700 Pro will face off against the GeForce FX 5800 Ultra in a brand new suite of tests with the best available drivers and a bench platform that will completely unleash their full potential. It's the ultimate showdown against two absolutely historic juggernauts for the final word on which card has truly stood the test of time. It's a match over 16 years in the making, and you'll only find it right here. This is PixelPipes. Let me just get one thing out of the way. The GeForce FX 5800 Ultra is a pain to get a hold of. Finding one that works is a challenge. Finding one for a reasonable price is nearly impossible. I am fortunate enough to have done both. Yes, I have a working 5800 Ultra now. Thanks to Eric from Pennsylvania, I was able to trade my non-working Ultra for a BFG model that does work for the price of shipping. I swapped the tops of the fan shrouds to keep the look of my card original, and my broken 5800 Ultra eventually made its way to Russia, where an individual known as Cool Tweak was able to diagnose the faults and repair it. Turns out the source of my troubles were some bad memory chips and broken soldering joints. Now it's alive and well and running benchmarks again. Such a happy ending. The BFG 5800 Ultra I have now runs flawlessly, and I'm now able to do something I've dreamed of doing since before I started this channel: benchmark and compare it against other graphics cards. The release of the 5800 Ultra in 2003 was a peculiar one. As far as I can tell, it never received a wide retail release, and the box for my BFG card even contains a thank you for pre-ordering the card printed directly on the cardboard. NVIDIA's official announcement of the GeForce FX series took place on November 18, 2002, almost exactly 3 months after the launch of ATI's Radeon 9700 Pro, following many long months of rumors and speculation. It wouldn't be until over 2 months later, with lots of additional hype, before the GeForce FX 5800 Ultra would officially launch at the tail end of January 2003. But as I said, it wouldn't be a wide release. NVIDIA seemingly wrote out the specs that they wanted to achieve before knowing if it was really doable. The 5800 Ultra would have a 500 MHz core clock, far above anything before it, and a similarly record-setting 1 GHz effective clock for their memory. They managed to ship enough out for the pre-orders, but yields of GPUs that could hit their spec requirement were pitiful, in no small part thanks to an unproven 130nm manufacturing process. ATI used the tried-and-true 150nm process and shot for much more conservative clocks at 325 MHz core and 620 MHz memory, but with a much wider execution core. ATI's card comes with 8 PixelPipes and 4 vertex shaders, while NVIDIA's uses 4 PixelPipes with dual texturing units in each pipe and 2 vertex shaders. This gives the 9700 Pro a huge lead in pixel fill rate and geometry processing, while NVIDIA gains a higher texture fill rate in cases where multi-texturing is being utilized. Despite having lower clocked memory, the 9700 Pro still has much more memory bandwidth thanks to its then cutting-edge 256-bit memory interface, while the 5800 Ultra only has a 128-bit data width. NVIDIA sought to wow pundits and enthusiasts with their blistering fast performance in games available at the time of launch. Their card did indeed deliver that, managing to best the 9700 Pro in most contemporary titles. But what no one knew, not even ATI or NVIDIA, was how the two cards would fare with yet-to-be-released games and their next-generation shader effects. And that's exactly what I'm going to find out today. Both cards will be tested with drivers I've found to perform the best with each card. With the Radeon 9700 Pro, I will be using AMD's legacy Catalyst 10.2 release, a modern 2010 driver which gives huge gains for R300 based cards in DirectX 9 titles, at the cost of a very small hit to older games and benchmarks. For the 5800 Ultra, I'll be using Forceware 71.89, released in 2005, which gives the best balance of excellent performance without as many trade-offs in image quality that the FX series was known for. My AGP test rig has received an overhaul in time for this video with a new ASRock 775 i65G revision 3.0 and a Pentium E5800 running at 3.75 GHz. The speed of the processor is somewhat moot as both cards will be largely GPU limited in these tests, but a fast platform is always a good thing to have. We'll start things off with 3D Mark 03, a test that makes heavy use of DirectX 8 as well as DirectX 9 to a lesser extent. As you can see, the cards are close here with only a 657 point difference between them. This only represents an 11% advantage for the 9700 Pro. Then when we move on to 3D Mark 05, a much more stressful test with DirectX 9, we see the gap widens dramatically with more than 3 times the points separating the 9700 Pro from the 5800 Ultra, and showing just how badly the FX series card struggles with heavy shader code. Things look more favorable for the 5800 Ultra in Serious Sam the second encounter, with a slight margin over the 9700 Pro both with and without anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering. It looks even worse for the 9700 Pro if you look closely at its 1% low result with AA and AF turned on. The Pro suffered bad stuttering with these settings, and it might be the fault of the driver. In Halo, the 9700 Pro climbs right back up, with a respectable 43% lead in average frame rates over the 5800 Ultra, and a huge 87% lead in 1% lows. This is an early game to make heavy use of DirectX 9, and it's definitely poking at the Ultra's weakness here. In Unreal Tournament 2004, once again, the lack of shader effects gives the 5800 Ultra another marginal win. It's interesting to see it perform better even with AA and AF enabled, despite its 128-bit memory interface. In my testing so far, anisotropic filtering in particular tends to suck a lot of performance out of the 9700 Pro. Then with another shader-heavy test, we see the 9700 Pro shoot far ahead of the 5800 Ultra, with its performance with AA and AF turned on besting the FX card without AA and AF. The 5800 Ultra really didn't care whether AA and AF were enabled, as its biggest bottleneck was easily the use of Shader Model 2.0 effects in this game. Half-Life 2 doesn't make quite as much use of SM2 as Far Cry, so the performance difference isn't quite as stark. The 9700 Pro is still a good deal faster, especially with AA and AF, but the results for the 5800 Ultra aren't quite as impressive when you find out it's actually forced to run in DirectX 8.1 mode. This means image quality on the Ultra isn't nearly as good as the 9700 Pro, with lots of banding evident in reflections, and attempting to force DirectX 9 mode only results in buggy rendering and a total slideshow. The feature is just broken on FX series cards. Doom 3 is a game that NVIDIA heavily promoted with the FX series cards and the later GeForce 6 series. Despite that, ATI's driver improvements over the years managed to help it claw its way past the 5800 Ultra, and the race is actually fairly close between them. It should be noted NVIDIA's Ultra Shadow performance-saving technology wouldn't be implemented until the 5900 series, and so they don't benefit from that feature this time around. Then when we move on to 2005, here's where things get brutal for the FX series. While the 9700 Pro actually manages to give playable performance in Serious Sam 2 maxed out at 1024x768, the 5800 Ultra turns in roughly a third of the performance. It won't matter what driver you use, the architecture simply can't handle the heavy reliance on Shader Model 2.0 prevalent in the games of this era. Things aren't much better in Fear. I tweaked the settings to allow the 9700 Pro to get a playable frame rate, but with the same settings, the 5800 Ultra gives out something akin to stop-motion animation. This was one of the most intense games of 2005, and while it's a tough game on any card of the era, it's amazing to see that with just a couple of adjustments, the 9700 Pro can play the game nearly maxed out at 1024x768. The 5800 Ultra is best left in DirectX 8 mode. So there goes what may or may not be the final word on this epic match against the two cards that introduced the world to DirectX 9. Focusing on the 5800 Ultra for a moment, we'll start with the pros of the card. There were a couple of instances in which it managed to perform better than the 9700 Pro, even with AA and AF enabled. Unfortunately, those instances were only with about a 10% margin generally, with Serious Sam the second encounter peaking at 19%, with a very strong 1% low compared to the 9700 Pro's abysmal performance with AA and AF in that game. But there's an obvious pattern with the games the 5800 Ultra does well in, and those tend to lack support for Shadow Model 2.0. The bulk of the titles I chose focused on this feature, as the real test should be to see how well the cards could handle more futuristic games that heavily use their much touted DirectX 9 feature set. And well, the results couldn't be more clear-cut. In those more strenuous cases, the 9700 Pro was typically anywhere between 2 to 3 times faster than the 5800 Ultra. This is akin to a generational difference between cards, not a comparison between two from the same generation. And that's really what it comes down to, because the 9700 Pro was truly built for the next generation in mind. And it's no wonder that Microsoft spec'd Shadow Model 2.0 around ATI's implementation, or that game developers seem to tailor their games to its hardware. The 5800 Ultra behaved more like a previous generation architecture, great for DirectX 8 and older titles, but with an off-spec DirectX 9 implementation added on top of that. From a design standpoint, it simply didn't have the performance to back the feature up. In these card battles videos, I like to talk about the value and practicality of the cards in question for retro PC gamers, but in the case of the 5800 Ultra, well, there is no value or practicality. The card only shows up on eBay once in a great while, and prices have been known to far exceed $1,000, even if you manage to get one using it as a test of will. The blower fan is at 100% as soon as any 3D application is loaded. The high-pitched whine that will then blare at you incessantly will not be drowned out by your speakers, and you'll pray instead for the sweet sound of a dentist drill burrowing into your teeth. The cooling solution isn't just bad because it's noisy, it has one of the most baffling designs of any graphics card cooler you'll run across. At first glance, it appears to be just another blower-style fan like any other, but on closer inspection you can see that the intake and outtake are situated in the same slot. The bottom portion takes in cool air from the outside, and the fan pushes it through the shroud and over the copper fins, which are supplied with 3 heat pipes to pull heat from the GPU and memory. The hot air exits the top portion, but it's completely unavoidable that the card will pull the hot air back in through the intake, eliminating most of the cool air. It's a lousy design that dooms the cooler from ever being truly effective. The 9700 Pro wins the practicality contest by default. If you're patient enough, you can find one for under $50, especially if you search by part number. They are, however, a dying breed, and I've gone through 3 myself before I found one that works, and other collectors I've talked to experience similar difficulties. The fragility may come from a flaw in the GPU package, as documented by other channels like Cutting Edge Retro and Phil's Computer Lab. The metal shim around the GPU is actually thicker than the GPU itself, preventing the heatsink from getting proper contact with the die. And I encourage you to check out the video in the top right corner for more info on that. Otherwise, the card is smaller, cheaper, faster, with better image quality, and a hell of a lot less noise. What the 9700 Pro was able to achieve in terms of performance is truly impressive. Games 3 years newer than itself could actually run at playable frame rates with high settings, something that was virtually unheard of at the time. NVIDIA would quickly release the 5900 Ultra, which remedied many of the problems of the 5800 Ultra, and ATI would counter with the 9800 Pro, another legendary card for its time. That'll be a comparison for another day. But for now, it's an amazing feeling to have finally been able to take the original contenders to the arena for one last bout. And if you're anything like me, then hopefully you've enjoyed this historical reenactment as much as I have. There's still more to come in the future, so keep it glued to this channel, and as always, thanks for watching. I'm Nathan, and this has been PixelPipes.